Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Vanessa Elia. I'm a board member of American Friends of Tel Aviv University, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to this important briefing, The Middle East, Israel, and the US, a strategic analysis with Professor Uzi Rabi. You're all in for a huge treat. These are not easy times for Israel or Jews around the world. By supporting Tel Aviv University, by being here today, listening to what we are saying, educating yourselves, you are helping to ensure Israel's future. Every dollar, whether designed to research, faculty recruitment, scholarship, or endowment, will help today's students become tomorrow's leaders. Our collective support now is what is needed to safeguard the strength of Israel. We must all continue to work together to ensure that Israel's largest university has the resources to continue to change the world. We are hopeful that today's webinar will shed light on the multi-front war that Israel is facing and provide a greater understanding of the changing geopolitical situation in the Middle East. Following the presentation, there will be a question and answer session. If you have questions, please write them down in the Q&A box on your screen, and we will do our very best to answer as many as possible. Now it is my pleasure to introduce you to a very special speaker. Professor Uzi Rabi is a former head of the Moshe Dayan Center for Middle Eastern and African Studies, Tel Aviv University's internationally top-rated think tank. He is a leading authority on the Middle East, including modern history and evolution, Iranian-Arab relations, and oil and politics in the Middle East. His accomplishments and credentials are too extensive to list. So in the spirit of brevity and getting to the reasons we are here, I will turn the program over to Professor Rabi. Professor Rabi, it's all yours.
Thank you, Vanessa, for this very generous introduction. It is a real pleasure to be here with you today and trying actually to share with you some of the insights we actually have with regard to this ever-changing region. So let me actually share with you my just a minute. So we're going to start and do it step by step. Basically, what I tend to argue is that the Middle East is going through a tumultuous, really a tumultuous change. It is kind of an upheaval that can be seen in different actually sites of the Middle East: Gaza, Syria, Iran, Saudi Arabia. And there is kind of an interconnection between all these parts, especially as we just witnessed the coming to the fore of Donald Trump, the American president, who has kind of a different style while dealing with everything, especially the Middle East, and basically the combination of a new administration in the US and the cleavage and very, very deep changes that are being occurred in this region, well, the combination of all these created kind of a new panorama in the Middle East. There are many challenges for Israel, but I must say that at times it feels as if Israel is getting wiser, we can make, or I would say, create some openings that would try actually to preserve and better improve the Israeli interest. So we're gonna go in this PowerPoint step by step. I'll try actually to give you an idea of how dramatic the change is in every part of the Middle East. And then toward the end of my presentation, we are going actually to come to kind of a conclusion of where we stand and where are we heading to, what are actually the challenges with which the road is fraughted with, and at the same time, as I said before, where is the bright side of life when it comes to the Middle East? So everything, as you remember, started in October 7th, 23, and this part of the Palestinian reality, the strip of Gaza, with Gaza City as its capital. Of course, this is just one dimension of the political reality of Palestinians. The other one is what is named by the Palestinians the West Bank of River Jordan, of course, with Ramallah its capital city. And there we have, of course, Abu Mazen, who is a member of the Fatah movement, which I would say signifies for a more secular understanding of life when it comes to the Palestinian angle. Hamas, in contrast, would hail the religious dimension of the conflict and would create something that would make him sort of a, I would say, kind of a fee to Hamas, to Fatah. And those two are at loggerheads. Let me just remind you that in 2006, there was kind of an open fight in Gaza on who is going to become the ruler there. It ended up with a swift victory of Hamas, which was to expel Fatah from Gaza. And from then on, we have two-dimensional reality of Palestinians, Ramallah versus Gaza. Hamas, of course, is trying actually to strive to dominate the whole scene. And this is why we do see them now very, very active in what is called in Hebrew, Judea and Samaria. Here, I stand in Samaria. There are three main cities who are going through a process of what I would call Azatization. It is Jenin, Tulkarem, and Nablus, and basically Hamas and Islamic Jihad, the Islamist camp of the Palestinian, would try actually to shift the struggle against Israel to that part of Judea and Samaria. If you can notice, this is where actually those, this part of what Palestinians would name Palestine is very, very adjacent to the very beating heart of Israel. Here is Tel Aviv. You can see how narrow this strip is. And when Tulkarem, Jenin, and Nablus are trying actually to strengthen themselves, fighting against Israel, it comes down to the heart of Israel. So this is something we have to take into account. Today, this is exactly what we are dealing with in the north of Samaria. On the other hand, Israel has just entered once again Gaza, and basically tensions grew higher. And we have to understand that here we have kind of a crossroads or a juncture where we have to just decide, Israel should decide how to proceed, because there is the issue of hostages and then the issue of annihilation of Hamas. What comes first? Well, Israelis would rather have, of course, and it is natural, the hostages, but too many a time there is kind of a contradiction between these objectives, and this is where we stand, a very complicated issue. Just remind yourself one thing: once those criminals, Islamists, Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, manage to have hostages, this actually brings Israel close to a paralysis. Israel cannot come to full flower, militarily speaking, in a region where the foe, or in that case Hamas, is holding hostages. In Lebanon, Hezbollah didn't manage actually to have hostages. and there Israel actually came to full flower when it comes to its military operations, and we have many, many achievements there, and I would talk about that later on. But just have this in mind, because some lessons can be learned immediately at this stage. We have to make sure that we are bolstering our borders in kind of a way that would never, and I mean never, allow actually these bad guys to do the same thing as they did on the 7th of October. And that goes not only to Gaza and Samaria and Judea, but also to Syria and Lebanon. This is a lesson to be learned. This is an immediate lesson. There are many lessons that should be gleaned in order to create a better Israel for the future, for our next generation. Let's go to the day after. This is kind of a slogan that had been reiterated time and again in the recent year. People were mistaken to say that because Israel hasn't got a formula of the day after, we cannot actually move forward, and we are stuck in the middle of things without an ability to create something else. Well, the day after is kind of a thing which is very important, but let me actually just be more sharpened in order to explain what is the problem with the day after when it is being epitomized that way. Here is Gaza. Look at Gaza. Israel is currently here in Beit Hanun, Beit Lahiya, Jabalia. By the way, yesterday in the north of Gaza, citizens of these part of Gaza were protesting for the first time against Hamas in kind of a direct manner. And their bottom line was to say that if they would like to have better life, they understand now that one way or the other, Hamas should be pulled out from Gaza. This is kind of a change. I don't know if that would become kind of the change by which to say that Gaza actually is going through another route. But basically, this is very, very important when it comes to the political culture of Gaza, especially as this corresponds with some of the words we do hear from states like Egypt, who came to realize that there would be no solution to Gaza as long as Hamas stays in. And this is where we stand now. Hamas is not the ruler of Gaza. It is a terror organization that took control over Gaza and cynically use it in order to bolster its position there. We are here. What we should say is the day after, we should add Hamas. Everybody could talk about the day after. Few and far between are coming up with a formula which could create kind of a difference. And this is where we stand. How and to what extent we can make sure that Gaza in the day after is being left without Hamas. If that would be the case, there would be a flourishing day after, because some Arab states would be very, very happy to hear the news. Some of them had promised in advance kind of a support financially, materially speaking. I'm talking about Saudi Arabia, I'm talking United Arab Emirates, some other states. Egypt is included too. And this is something which is very important for us to understand. We are at a stage where we can achieve that. But once again, because we have the hostages issue in the midst of the whole thing, we have to understand that it would be it wouldn't be that easy to solve it out in kind of a one shot. Look at that. This is the X factor. Donald Trump, you know, even before his inauguration, he demanded that hostages will be returned to Israel once he is being inaugurated. And look at that, what he promised to the Middle East in the case hostages are not being returned to Israel is sort of a hell. Let me just say some words about his blunt language and his attitude. This is very, very scary when it comes to Arabs in this region. They are not used to that kind of a Western leader. He looks like a Western leader, but basically he comes up with stuff which is an anathema when it comes to from Western leader to many Arabs and Muslim in that region. He managed to say also that he would be very happy, more than happy, to make Gaza be recuperated. This is Jabalia. Gaza is in ruins. What Hamas actually had done here is to create kind of a situation that this strip, the strip of Gaza, if to be repaired, that is kind of an effort that would take 5 to 10 years. What Trump is coming up is not out of the box thinking, it's out of the cosmos thinking. What he said is that, okay, I'm going to do that. In the beginning, he even said that they are going to buy it. But basically what Trump actually is having in mind, that if Gaza is being left with no Gazans, it would take 5 to 10 years to turn it into sort of a Riviera. As if we are talking about Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia. Of course, American investors actually have performed that way when it comes to the other part of the Middle East. So basically, it's a very interesting idea, but, you know, it seems far-fetched to fulfill it. And it's definitely created kind of a wave of protests coming from many, many Arab states who were afraid of their own public to be introduced as traitors of the Palestinian problems if they are going actually to comply with what Donald Trump said. So there was kind of a saying, this was a verbal bomb being sent to the Middle East, relocation, this is my words. But I think that what Trump is doing here, and I tend to think that there is kind of a thinking behind that, is what they call in political psychology calculated risk, which means that I don't want to get into this Riviera thing in the end of the day. But if, because I put it that way, I would make Arabs and other states of the region to start move to kind of a more creatory understandings and thinking, that would be the change that we would very happy with. And basically, we'll have to wait and see. But at this stage, Egypt and Jordan are being pressured by the Americans to come up with something that would be as sort of an alternative to the Trump plan regarding Gaza. The first to run to Washington was the king of Jordan, King Abdullah, who was very, very bewildered to hear what President Trump has in mind, because he knew that if Gaza is being evacuated, he should host 500,000 Gazans in his own kingdom. Let me remind you, this guy, this king is not Palestinian. He is a Hashemite. 2/3 of his kingdom are Palestinians. More than 1 million people are Syrian refugees. almost other million people are Iraqi refugees. The last thing that this king would really need to have in his kingdom, on top of all problems that I just named, is 500,000 Palestinians or Gazans, which happen actually to be identified with the Muslim Brothers, kind of a movement that wouldn't actually praise the kingdom of Jordan and King Abdullah. So he went to Washington, and what he got there is kind of a very traumatic experience, because he was asked in a press conference, Your Majesty, would you be so kind as to tell us how many Gazans you're going to shift into your kingdom? And he came with the number 2,000 children who are very ill. He already took them, but it was something that comes to nothing in terms of the whole picture. And Trump was sitting there and saying in front of him to the journalists, don't worry, he will take more. This is kind of a style which many Arab states are really thrilled of, are really terrified of. And what Abdullah thought is that once he is having the opportunity to re-explain to Mr. President why it is so complicated to have 500,000 Gazans in Jordan, he thought that he would make the president wiser. But as I said before, Trump is using a very blunt, at times, it sounds as if this is a little bit mafiosi when it comes to the Arab states, by which to say, hey guys, I do help you time and again. It is irrational that once I am asking you something, you refuse actually to comply with my demand or my diktat. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi of Egypt, the other state which is going actually to have the burden of what's going on in Gaza, according to Trump, Sisi decided not to come to Washington and to talk to Trump from far away. He, in the recent weeks, came up with concerted effort by which to compile an Arab-Egyptian plan, which is named Gaza 2030. He inaugurated this whole thing in Cairo in kind of a ceremony of the Arab League. What this Gaza 2030 stands for. This program or plan says loud and clear that Gaza should be recuperated. Give us 5 years from now on. This is why it is 2030. We are going actually to invest in Gaza. We are going to run Gaza with kind of a government of experts, technocrats, Palestinians. Give us a transitory phase of 6 months. And thereafter, we are going actually to see to what extent we can involve Palestinians in the running of the day-to-day in Gaza, together with 4 Arab states, once again, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the Emirates. The problem with that program, no mentioning of Hamas. The simple fact that I am creating a different government doesn't say that Hamas is being evaporated just like that. And of course, deliberately, Egypt and Arab states did not mention Hamas, because still, this is the elephant in the room. And this is the main $1 million question. Who is going to fight Hamas and force him to be rearmed, to be basically out of authority when it comes to Gaza, to demilitarize him, and to make sure that Gaza in the day after, for Gaza in the day after, Hamas is going to be something that has to do with the past. This is the general understanding, guys. Israel cannot go on with that kind of a neighbor that from day one is committed, fully committed 100% to the annihilation of Israel. There is no compromise with such guys. There are many Arab states. Israel could do a lot of things together, not with those guys. Hamas should be something that should be ultimately marginalized in terms of running Gaza, either militarily or when it comes to the bureaucratic manner. Humanitarian aid should not actually get into Gaza, because in the end of the day, it would end up in the hands of Hamas, and he would cynically use it to further bolster his position there. So either Israel, Arab states, or I don't know, but an alternative should take control over the humanitarian aid being sent to Gaza. This is the most efficient way by which to empty Hamas of its authority in Gaza. And this is a must. Gaza was for 20 years sort of independent. Israel was not there because Israel disengaged from Gaza in 2005. If you look actually the way Gaza was run and was educated, this is the most important thing. Mein Kampf of Hitler was translated into kind of an Arabic book named Kifahi, My Struggle, and that was kind of a mandatory in the basic educational system in Gaza. When you try to understand how people, flesh and blood, could come up with such atrocities, you should understand that for 20 years, with Israel out of Gaza, Hamas had been programmed, educated those young people under the premise of demonization of Israel, dehumanize Israel. When you get that in that abundance for 20 years, when you are grown up, you can actually definitely perform that way when it comes to the atrocities of Gaza. That was kind of a very, very bitter reminder for Israelis to stay tuned with reality, not to use all these slogans as if there is kind of a winning formula by which to solve all the problems of the Middle East. This is what we are doing in the Dayan Center. The Middle East is so complicated, so many cultures, so many languages. It's a huge forest. And we have to come to work aware of the elusive nature of Middle Eastern geopolitics, and make sure that once we internalize the change, we know how to adjust Israeli interests to it. There is no winning formula, remember that. It is being actually compiled from so many, once again, species when it comes to ethnicity, when it comes to language, religion, geography, ecology. This is why if Israel would like actually to survive in that part of the region, the Moshe Dayan Center in Tel Aviv University, a bunch of experts in the Middle East who are familiar with the languages being spoken there. A bunch of experts which is very, very well aware of him or his back of mind. This is something that Israel badly needs. It was not here before the 7th of October. We tried to make Israelis understand that. But Israelis actually were pretty sure that since IDF is that strong, Hamas wouldn't act as he acted in the 7th of October. But their judgment was based on their experience, not on Hamas experience. They thought as an average Israeli, without getting a real idea of what goes on in Yahya Sinwar mind. So I leave it at this stage here. There is a lot of nitty-gritty details that can be added, but this is the main theme. Gaza is definitely one of the main spots which could reflect and give us an idea as to how tumultuous the change in the Middle East is. But if I would really like to take the most important region in the Middle East that in the last 3 months was to experience a very dramatic change, it would be Syria. And in order to get an idea about the Syrian puzzle, you should look at this state adjacent to Lebanon. Lebanon and Syria were created actually 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago, in 1921 by the French. It was Grand Liban, which is Greater Lebanon, when it comes to that state, and Syria when it comes to the other state. But just take a note, Syria from the beginning was compiled of so many ethnies, so many religious and ethnic types, that cohesion was not there from the beginning. Pre-state identities were so evident in the modern life of Syria that at times you couldn't ignore the conclusion that the state is being taken captive by primordial identities. Look at that. Sunni rebels 3 months ago were heading to Damascus, ousting Bashar al-Assad, an Alawite who is aided by Iran, Shiite Iran, and by Hezbollah here in Lebanon. And we can say that 10 years ago, many Sunnis in Syria were slaughtered by this coalition of Russia, Iran, Bashar al-Assad, and Hezbollah in Lebanon. 600,000 Syrians were slaughtered in the recent decade because Sunnis were trying to topple Bashar al-Assad in Damascus. 3 months ago, they tried again. What made them try again? What made them try again is the fantastic performance of Israel in Lebanon. Israel came up with some military operations that left behind so deep and painful an impression for both Hezbollah and Iran, that this by itself made the Syrian rebels here in Idlib, in the white spot, to go into Damascus, to conquer Damascus, and to turn Syria from a Shi'i Alawite dominated state to a Sunni dominated state. Now you have to understand what I just said now. Syria was one thing until 3 months ago, and totally another thing the day after. Why? Sunnah and Shia are erstwhile foes, eternal rivals. That comes from times immemorial, the very advent of Islam. But look at what's going on here. If Syria was kind of a place where Iran could do whatever it wants until 3 months, now Iran is not allowed to get into Syria. Hezbollah is not allowed to get into Syria. This is a geopolitical revolution. This is not thanks to Trump. This is thanks to Israeli fantastic performance in Lebanon and in Syria. Let me just remind you, there is no army in Syria. Israel capitalized on this regime change, and in 3 to 4 days, it demolished the Syrian army, which makes Israel be much stronger than ever before when it comes to shaping its borders with both Lebanon and Syria. Unprecedented. Kurds, heterodox. Alawites, heterodox. Druze, heterodox. All these 3 sects, by pure Islamists, and the guy in Syria, the incumbent ruler, Muhammad al-Jawlani or Ahmed al-Shara, if you get into his resume, you would find that this guy was a leader of Al-Qaeda in Syria. According to Al-Qaeda, fundamentalist jihadist ideology, Druze, Alawites, and Kurds are not to be considered Muslims. And according to their faith, those guys should be badly treated and basically slaughtered. This is exactly what happened 2 weeks ago here. The Alawites who are sitting here, the aides or the confidants of the ousted ruler Bashar al-Assad, were left unprotected. And what we have seen here is very, very difficult even to talk about, to describe. We don't know actually what is going to be the end game in Syria. There are many changes here, but Iran and Hezbollah stand to be the ultimate losers of all these geopolitical ramifications of the Gaza events of 7th of October. Yahya Sinwar took a decision to invade Israel, to come up with all these atrocities. His allies, Hezbollah, Revolutionary Guards in Iran, couldn't resist the temptation of supporting him and attack Israel. But I dare say in that stage that this heralded the end of their career in Israel, in the Middle East. Look at that now. Who is coming from above? This is Recep Erdogan, who is trying to capitalize on what happened in Syria. He is so happy to realize that there are no Iranians, neither Hezbollah fighters in Syria, as to get into that and starting to, I would say, rebuild the neo-Ottoman dream. All these arrows are moving to Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Israel. As if we are there. This is just one ramification. Turkey is in. Iran is out. This is not kind of something to be thrilled by itself if you are an Israeli, but basically when it comes to the sort of a hindrance to Iran, kind of a cutting off its all domination in this region, this is definitely good news. Here are the Kurds, very, very anxious about their future survival. Here are the Druze. This is Sweda down there in the Syrian Golan Heights. They are also very, very anxious. And this is why actually they tried to make Israel or approach Israel in kind of a very delicate manner to get some protection from Israel. Israel was very quick to positively answer. Here is Jeremiah here. This is kind of a Druze village next to Damascus or adjacent to Damascus. When the people or the Sheikh of Jeremiah, Druze, was thinking that the village is about to be assaulted by Al-Jawlani's brigades, Sunnis, he quickly sent a message of SOS to his brothers in the Israeli Golan Heights in a city named Majd al-Shams. And from there, hastily, it was actually delivered to the Israeli government that said loud and clear that Israel wouldn't let it go unnoticed if Jeremiah or any other Druze in the Golan Heights, Syrian Golan Heights, is going to be attacked or damaged by the Jawlani's brigade. Differently put, Israel is having sort of an informal understanding with the Druze that they are going to be protected by Israel. And for that purpose, Israel is declaring that from Damascus to the border, southern Syria should be demilitarized. The same thing is going in Jordan, in Lebanon. Look at this map. Iran lost it all. Tried to take Syria out of this map, and you see what I meant. This, by the way, was the program of demolishing Israel, annihilating Israel. They didn't succeed. But if Israel would like actually to make sure that this thing is not going actually to happen once again, as I said before, some bitter lessons has to be learned in kind of a very, very systematic manner. Iran, by the way, guys, is very weak, left without proper air defense system. It was proved by the Israeli attack on Iran last October. We have actually to see how things are going to be played out by Trump. Trump is sending a message to Khamenei in order to create kind of an opening for an agreement. If you ask me, I myself actually would rather have this agreement not be fulfilled as to be left with the option of military attack on Iran. You know, in Hebrew we say, Im lo achshav ematai, because this is a golden opportunity not to get rid from the nuclear program necessarily, because this is very different, but maybe to get rid of this cunning and terrible regime of the Republic Islamic of Iran, which is responsible for many of the problems and dangers that were created recently in the Middle East. Houthis, look at the American performance in Yemen. Houthis are being taken as equivalent to Iran. And this is why we are in a very delicate manner. Because we are running short of time, let me just in 3 minutes actually end up my presentation saying that we should say a word or two about the brighter side of Middle Eastern realities. This would take us to Lebanon, maybe. This is the new president, Joseph Aoun, Maronite, Christian, Lebanese, who would like actually to strive for a different equation of Lebanon with the support of Israel, France, and the United States. More Lebanon, less Hezbollah. And you can see what Hezbollah is trying to do in Lebanon these days, because these guys actually feel as if somebody is pulling the rug under their feet. And this is something that we have to just be well aware of. The other main thing, maybe the most important one when it comes to the brighter side of the Middle East, is the kingdom. This is Mohammed bin Salman, the heir in Saudi Arabia, who is definitely one of the main confidants of Donald Trump and Jared Kushner in the Middle East. Just take a note that many negotiations regarding Ukraine are being held in Riyadh, which is the capital city of Saudi Arabia. As you know, this is a very rich kingdom. And Trump does believe that a guy like Mohammed bin Salman, with the financial capacity, with the many constraints you have as a leader in Saudi Arabia who would like to better cope with problems of ecology, water, desertification in the 21st century, Saudi Arabia took a decision. It is not that they do not criticize Israel. Yes, of course. They would like to see Israel actually coming up with something which is very real with regard to the Palestinian. But for them, for United Arab Emirates, Israel is not an existential threat. Israel should be cooperated with because a kind of a win-win cooperation is going to benefit both sides. And this is exactly what these states are having in mind. If there would be a normalization between Israel, tiny Israel here, on the eastern shore of the Mediterranean, and huge Saudi Arabia, look at that. It goes all the way to the Persian Gulf here, very close to the United Arab Emirates. This is how the map is going to look like. The colored states are Arab states. The green states, Egypt and Jordan, have a peace treaty with Israel. Saudi Arabia, if would normalize its relations with Israel, and the Sultanate of Oman, together with the already existent normalization agreement with here in the orange color, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Morocco on the other side, you have kind of an Arab bloc that would halt Iran and would create kind of a platform which is being supported by the US, maybe by Europe, in order to create something big. And let me just end up with that. 2 months ago, I've been to the United Arab Emirates. I took part in an international conference that dealt with this item. Look at that. It is named IMEC. I stands for India, M for Middle East, E for Europe, C, a connecting corridor. This is how this map should look like if and when maybe the second map would be much clearer if we would like to understand that. How are we going to shift people, energy from the east to the west? A couple of or more centuries ago, it was here by bypassing the continent of Africa, the Cape of Good Hope, in order to get from India or Southeast Asia to Italy, France, Germany, and others. Recently, 19th century, when the Suez Canal was opened, the way was through Bab el-Mandab here in Yemen, all the way up to the Red Sea, Suez Canal, and then to the Middle East, to the Mediterranean, sorry, which is the seaway leading to South Europe. You see that? How about this thing? Straight ahead, India, UAE, Saudi Arabia having normalized relations with Israel, if and when Haifa is here, and then you go straight to Italy and Marseille here in France. If that is going to be the case, Israel is going to be benefited. Saudi Arabia is going to be benefited. I can assure you that Israel is going to become highly profitable when it comes to the energy market, not to mention what we call Gaza or the Eilat Ashkelon pipeline, which is very important here. This is the future. This is what Trump has in mind. By this program, he is going to neutralize China, which is coming from the Belt and Road strategy, north and south. This is something that fits his agenda, and he strives for that. So in my opinion, he would like actually to lock all these open disputes in order to create kind of an industrial silence and to get the normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And here you get kind of a different Middle East. You should believe in it because the infrastructure is there. What we need here is just the belief that we can get there. I'll stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this really insightful and fascinating lecture you have given us. We don't have much time for questions, but you answered almost all of them in your wonderful lecture. So I would like to ask one, which is, you have said that as part of the research at the Moshe Dayan Center, the team regularly communicates with students in other countries. It seems that so much of the region has been radicalized. Is there a way to successfully de-radicalize or change the mentality, specifically in Gaza and Judea and Samaria, that are so affected, that affect Israel so much?
Yes, I think that it is feasible, but let's make sure we understand we have to be very, very patient when we are going through that kind of a course. Why? Because we are dealing with education. Re-education would take a lot of time, but let me give you that. Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates have done that in their own countries. They are more than happy and ready to put it to the test also in Gaza. But in one condition, they say, the day after Hamas. And you know, those guys are very, very smart, Saudi Arabia and Emirates. They have a lot of money. They would like to invest it because they are going actually to get the profit, not financially. Because if you are going to take care of those, I would say, extremist clans in the Middle East, you are going actually to make it better for Middle Easterners to live in. And if you come to think of that, they have managed to prove that people, after going through a process of de-radicalization, this is how they name the program, are going, in the end of the day, at least part of them, become kind of, law-abiding citizens, if I can say so.
Okay,
It's
we
not
have
100% success, but it is definitely worth a shot. So we should be there. We should be patient, but this is definitely the direction we should just come up with.
So one more question we have time for. As you mentioned earlier in your lecture, the Trump administration recently proposed an alternative solution for Gaza, suggesting a need for out-of-the-box thinking. While Palestinian leadership has long benefited from refugee status and would therefore not condone Trump's suggestions, there is also concern that relocating Gazans to neighboring countries would destabilize those nations. Given these dynamics, how viable do you think such relocation is? Because a destabilized Jordan or Egypt is even more dangerous for Israel.
If at all, it would be only kind of a partial solution. I don't think that Gaza is going to be emptied of Gazans. And I think that Trump knows that too. What he has managed to do is to force Arab states, by introducing his program, to come up with something which, at least for Arab states, is unprecedented. How to deal with Gaza, to declare or to say loud and clear that we, Arab states, Egypt, Jordan, others, we are ready to take part of the commitment on Gaza on ourselves. This by itself is kind of a breakthrough. And this is sort of a partial success, I would say, without even do something, just bringing in this verbal bomb, as I said. And this is why I said this is a calculated risk. I'm not sure that Trump is aiming that this would be the end game, Gaza without Gazans. No, but I think that what he aims at is many Arabs coming to the fore, a creation of something which is different, in the end of which there would be kind of different situation in Gaza, and the Palestinian regime whatsoever would make it loud and clear that the right of return, the issue of refugees is something that belonged to the past. Israel is a legitimate state. I think that it would take time, but if we are going actually to be very, very systematic and consistent on that, I'm pretty sure that we're going to see some good, in my opinion, developments. It is very complicated, of course, but if just to look at the bright side of stuff, I can tell everybody I've been a lot to the United Arab Emirates, to Bahrain, to Morocco. I know that these states, together with Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Egypt, are highly needed for the stuff that is very, very essential to cope or better deal with Mother Nature in the 21st century. And they are really, really troubled by this ecological thing, desertification, agriculture in the desert, renewable energies, where they could find a laboratory where they could cooperate with and create kind of a platform that would be very useful for their own future and later on generations. Israel is a partner. Israel should be cooperated with. Now, Israel should be wise as to respect the other and create kind of a very respectful platform of cooperation, because this and only this is going to be the right recipe by which to pacify, at least partially, some of the parts of the Middle East. And I'm pretty sure that we're going to have that sooner than later. I do hope so.
Thank you, Professor Rabi, for being so generous with your time and expertise, especially. Thank you to all our friends around the world for joining us today and for your ongoing support for Tel Aviv University. We need you. We pray for the safe return of our remaining hostages, for the safety of every soldier and citizen of Israel, and we pray most of all for peace, and thank you for striving to do that for us.
Amen. Thank you
Thank,
so much, guys. Thank you,
thank you.
Vanessa. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.